Hi everybody, it's Kim from Patriot Garden, and today is part 3 of preparing for winter. If you didn't see the first two, the first one was getting your pantry and your long-term storage for food ready for the winter. The second one was getting ready for your chickens in the winter, and today is putting the garden to bed. So before we get started today, I want to thank you for supporting this channel. I want to remind you to subscribe, share these videos with any new gardeners that you might know, or someone that's thinking of starting a garden or a small homestead in the spring, because there's plenty of planning and thinking ahead to do. And again, I thank you tremendously for your support. We are up to 210 subscribers, which is pretty big for us, and sharing those videos will be the best thing you can do for us. And remember, as per the YouTube algorithm, watching my videos from your YouTube channel and watching it through to the end is going to also help those videos to get pushed out to other people. So if you're there supporting our channel, I thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's get started amending these beds. All right, so I just want to show you the status of what's going on in the garden right now. So all the beds have been cleared of plant material. I cut everything off at the surface, left the root material in the ground. As you can see, there's a few things still going on. I've got some cabbages and some dinosaur kale that had started to grow. So our temperatures are going to be just hovering above or below freezing for the next week. I don't expect it to get any warmer than that at night. So I'm going to be throwing a frost blanket over those and see if I can keep harvesting some kale and get the cabbages to some sort of maturity before I really can't sustain them out here any longer. I discovered we had down in this bed some strawberries growing. I didn't even know I had planted them. I'm sure I didn't. I'm sure a bird planted them, or one of the chickens planted them, or somebody planted them. But I've got some wire mesh right over here because I'm letting the chickens come in and do their scratching and amending of their own in these beds, and I don't want them to rip up the strawberry plants. But they'll be fine over winter. I'm not going to amend and scratch up the soil around them, but I will cover them and mulch them for the winter. And you'll see at the back end, I've also got some herbs still growing, some cilantro, which is just a little bit of a sprig now, but it hasn't died yet. I'm going to keep it growing. And I've got some Swiss chard, and I covered that with chicken wire too. The girls have pretty much eaten that, so I consider that their snack area. Now, to amend these beds, I'm going to be adding 3 things. I'll go over what I'm adding, why I'm adding it, and in what amounts I'll be adding it per bed. I'll also let you know the dimensions of my bed so you can kind of measure. This is not an exact science, so if you're a half a pound up on an element, it's really not going to make a big difference. I'll share with you what I'm doing. It's really just a rough estimate. Why would you want to amend your beds at this time of the year? Well, a lot of things have been growing here. A spring garden, a summer garden, a fall garden, and these beds are pretty depleted of minerals and their trace elements that they're going to need to really give me a good yield next year. And then I'm going to mulch all the beds with some cut up leaves and grass clippings that I'm going to throw over the top that have been sitting in the woods, kind of settling and starting to decompose. And that'll be a great cover for them for the winter. Covering your beds is extremely important because you, don't want to risk any erosion should you have a heavy snowstorm that then melts, or you have a lot of rain. You don't want your soil to start, especially when you have like beds like this that are in the ground. I don't want my mounds to start dripping into the grass area. I want to keep my dirt right where it is. That's really good dirt. I think you remember last year I put some very good compost, what we called super dirt, in there. And I don't want it to end up in the grass. So I'm going to cover that with a mulch. And then I'm going to say goodbye to the garden till next spring. All right, girls, come on. You can't dig up my garlic. See you later. Bye. All right, so we're in the hoop house, which, by the way, is the next project this whole thing is going. I think I put on Instagram my plan for the next one, and I'll take you along when I start building that. I have all the materials. I just need the time. To get all of my amendments measured, I've already pretty much weighed this out and put a marking on this plastic container. I know approximately where I'll fill this for 1 pound and 2 pounds. I did that work ahead of time. Soil is a living organism, so the healthier it is, the better it's going to operate and produce. So just like our bodies, we want to make sure that it has everything it needs to be the best it can be, to fight off disease, to fight off invasion of insects, and help our plants grow the best that they can and give us the best yields. I mean, really, that is the end game, to grow as much food in these beds as we possibly can. When I'm talking elements, I'm talking the regular NPK, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium that you get in normal fertilizer. But I'm also talking about your trace elements like calcium and boron. I mean, there's a whole list of, and I'll go through those when we get to azomite, but those trace elements that are necessary for plant structure, for strong cell walls, for all the things that plants need besides just the basic NPK. First thing we're going to do is start with azomite. Azomite is a rock dust. It's actually volcanic rock that is mined and collected in Utah. This part of Utah where this volcanic rock is mined was once underwater. Now, the one thing we know about trace elements and giving your plants good fertilizer is that any plant from the sea is going to have a ton of trace elements. Why? Because everything from the earth runs into the sea. So things like kelp meal, which is dried and ground up kelp, or seaweed extracts, or anything like that that grows underneath the sea and is a repository of all these great trace elements, is also something else you can put on your beds. I just want to read off to you because it's the end of the day. My capacity for memorizing is pretty gone. The trace elements I'm hoping to replenish the soil with, that using azomite will help with, are things like boron and calcium and chlorine and cobalt and copper, iron, selenium, sodium, sulfur, and zinc. So azomite is going to help me build all those trace elements. Azomite also has a bit of your normal NPK, but they're also going to be getting that with some of the other amendments that I'm putting in. You know, in doing my research, I found this really cool thing. A man by the name of Liebig came up with what he called the law of minimum. And it's kind of like when you say a team is only as strong as its weakest link. Well, that's true in the soil, too. Your soil is only as strong as the element that you have least of. So you want to make sure that everything is replenished, that your soil is constantly being made healthy by things that you are purposeful in doing. Now, the next thing I'm going to be adding is worm castings. Worm castings is a great amendment to the soil. It's very high in nitrogen, which is something that is also easily lost by runoff and just growing your plants. They consumed all of that nitrogen, and you're going to want to put a lot of that back. Even plants that need phosphorus and potassium for root development and bulb development certainly need to start off with a great amount of nitrogen. So we're going to be adding those worm castings. And the last thing I'm going to be adding is humic acid. Humic should remind you of the word humus, which is decaying matter, right? Decaying plant matter. Humic acids are going to provide those necessary enzymes that are going to help plants uptake the nutrients that you're putting in. So here's how humic acid works basically. It is oxidized, and what oxidized means is that it is negatively charged. Your elements, for the most part, what you're putting in there, are positively charged, which means they're going to attract each other and they're going to bond to each other. And so those humic acids are going to suck up the nutrients, and then they're going to be sucked up by the plant. That's an oversimplification of the whole process, but that's why we're adding humic acid. Now, don't think because it says acid that it's going to affect your pH. It is not. The other thing that humic acid will do is to help siphon off the toxins in the soil. So I'm really excited about getting some of this on my beds. I'm really excited for the health of my soil for next year and for my garden being even more productive than it was this year. We are putting 2 pounds of worm castings on every raised bed, and I'm going to be putting 3 pounds of worm castings on my 40-foot rows. I'm going to be sprinkling 1.5 pounds of Azomite on every raised bed, and I'm going to be putting 2 pounds of Azomite on my 2 long rows behind me. Now I'm going to be putting 1 pound of humic acid in each of the raised beds, and I'm going to be putting 1.5 pounds in each of my long rows. So now all I'm going to do is take a rake. I'm going to lightly rake in those things on the top. As you can see, leaves have fallen into the beds. I'm just going to leave them there. It's not going to cause any harm. I'm going to rake everything in, and then I'm going to go get some of the grass clippings and leaves that my landscaper left for me, and we're going to cover the beds with those. Let me go show you that pile. As you can see, this pile's already starting to break down a bit. It's going to be great for a cover for my beds for this year. And then next year, I'll just roll everything over, cover it with compost. I don't know if you noticed as well, but the paths between my raised beds are quite broken down. I cover them with hay every year so that I'm not sinking in the mud, and they have created some really great compost. So between that and the stuff that's in my chicken run in the spring, this will get covered by that, and we'll have a really incredible soil to plant next year's crops in. All right, it's starting to get dark. I'm going to stop filming, and I'm going to get to finishing up, so this job is done. And if this was helpful for you, don't forget to throw a like down below. Don't forget to share this video and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Happy gardening, everybody.